right, welcome to Season 2 of the Sporting Chance Podcast, your home for all things falconry and unconventional hunting techniques.
This podcast is brought to you by MountainStateFalconrySupply.com. Check out Heather McNeamer's store for your East Coast falconry goods.
And also, this podcast is brought to you by MidnightFalconry.com, the makers of the tightest braided equipment on the market.
Check out supporter of the show, Sean O'Neill's Kennel, Clover Creek Canine on Facebook. Your source for performance canines since 1983.
And let us not forget our boy, Seth Roy, at NorthMountainGoshawks.com. And if you'd like to support the podcast, visit SportingChancePod.com for all of your merch needs.
All right. Assalamu alaikum, Alan.
Wa alaikum assalam.
How do we pronounce your full name?
So, Alan Colussy is my name, but my Muslim name is Abdul Akbar.
Abdul Akbar, that's your Muslim name?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
All
Yeah,
right.
I accepted Islam in January of 1995, shortly after my first trip to Pakistan. So,
Okay.
my first trip to Pakistan was in July of 94. And then in 96, I was the envoy to Pakistan for the 96 Olympic Games here in Atlanta. And then I went back again in 97 and did a little touring around in Abu Dhabi and Dubai and Bahrain and Muscat. And then I went to India for a little while. So I was in and out of Pakistan a bit. And then in 2001, I moved to Pakistan for a year and bought a house and, I left in 2002. I haven't been back since, but yeah.
Okay. That's interesting stuff. So welcome to the podcast.
Thanks.
All right. So you are a falconer.
I am. Yeah.
Tell us how you got into it.
Well, when I was 7, I read My Side of the Mountain and said, I'm going to do that. And then, I couldn't take my test on my 14th birthday because I was born on Labor Day. And that year, I think my birthday was on a Saturday or something. So I had to wait a couple days after my birthday to take my test. And, a few months later, I had my first red tail, and I've been doing it ever since. So I'm about to turn 50. So that's 36 years. 36 years now I've been flying birds.
That's
Nice.
incredible. What state did you start in?
Georgia. Yeah, I've lived in Atlanta pretty much all my life, but or at least Atlanta's always sort of neutral. When I came back from Pakistan in 2002, I took a job with the World Bird Sanctuary flying birds on McGuire Air Force Base in New Jersey, doing abatement there. And then I said, wow, that beats the hell out of like having an office job and just flying birds on weekends or whatever. So my family had a farm in Pennsylvania. My dad was from Pittsburgh. So a couple of years later, I moved up to Uniontown, Pennsylvania, and worked at Ligonier Latrobe Airport. And then I got a job flying birds for Dave Knutson at he's Clearview Resources, is the name of his company, at March Air Base in Riverside, California. And a year after that, I started doing landfills for Steve Vasconcelos up and I was living in Vacaville, but he was having me move around amongst a number of his contracts. So I'd be in Lompoc, California for 2 or 3 months, and then I'd be working in Redwood, then I'd be working in in Richmond and all over Northern California. And then I came back to Georgia for a bit, and then I went back out to California. I had a contract at a landfill in San Jose, and I did that for a year, and that was uh, 08. And then I'm back in Georgia now, and now I'm moving from Atlanta to a little town called Elberton, which is right on the South Carolina line. I bought some acreage. My father passed away a couple of years ago, so taking my little inheritance, and I'm going to be building a sort of falconry focused bed and breakfast event space. Um, you know, and so that's in the works at the moment.
That's very cool. So you've been doing abatement for most of
I
your adult
did.
life?
Well, no, I haven't done abatement since the crash of '09. Prior to '09, there were like less than 20 abatement companies in the country. And, you know, when I was working at March or at Newbie Island landfill, I was charging $100 an hour, 70 hours a week. And I had another falconer working for me and an assistant. And, our insurance premiums were about $5,000 a month because there are no actuarial tables for this. And so that that 30 grand a month was really the break even point. And when the crash of '09 happened, every hobby falconer that, was an outer work construction worker or whatnot said, well, let me get into abatement. And they'd go buy a Saker Falcon or something and really thought they could run a company on $50 an hour, 50 hours a week or something. And a lot of them went broke, and a lot of them didn't understand that abatement and falconry are very different. You're not out hunting when you're doing abatement. You're sort of training the native species of birds that you control that area. It's more like sheep herding with a falcon. You're herding seagulls. It's really different. And so they kind of ruined the industry. I mean, they saturated it with guys who didn't know what they were doing, and it ruined the industry for 20 years. It's coming back now. I still maintain a number of friendships with abatement guys, and the numbers are coming back. But it's for years. A good friend of mine in Colorado would call me up and say, "I've got a new issue. How would you get rid of cliff swallows off the, a side of an apartment building?" And we'd talk for a minute, and then finally he'd say, "What's it going to take for you, for you to just come out to Colorado and partner with me?" I'd say, well, one, I hate Colorado's falconry laws, so probably nothing. But then I'd end up saying, well, what are you making right now? What are you billing out? And I'd say, you're grossing less than a quarter what I was, 10 years ago. I think you should go back to selling, surgical equipment or whatever else, and be a hobby falconer, because the money's not in abatement anymore. Like I said, it's coming back, but it's still, you're lucky to get maybe 70% of what most folks were getting in 2008 right now. So, it's not there yet. But yeah, I haven't done abatement since '09.
There's a lot of competition in the. It's very cutthroat in the abatement industry.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, like I said, when I was doing abatement, there were about 20 companies in the country, and now I think there are like about 160 licensed. So it's very, very different.
What do you think people could do? Like, what would be your opinion to try to bring, not like obviously price fixing, you know what I mean? But like, what could we do
Right.
to bring that number back up so everybody can eat? You know what I mean?
I one if you had a more diverse, people going after more a wider range of contracts, so a lot more agricultural work. If landfills and airports, really, if you want to work in abatement, you're either going to be on the West Coast or in the Northeast, because there's very little abatement in the Southwest or in the middle of the country, with the exception of Air Force bases. But you're not going to be doing a landfill in Georgia, because the guys in the landfill, falconry is not on their radar. But if we got more on the radar and maybe sort of established a union, not to price fix, but to sort of give guidelines. Also, there were enough guys that there were better actuarial tables such that the cost of insurance could come down. Because right now, and for the last 20 years, since there are really no actuarial tables about what the risk is of falconry on an Air Force base or falconry at a landfill, whatever, you know, if you can find an insurance company that will write an insurance policy for you, they're just going to charge you whatever they think they can get away with charging you.
Right.
And so, like when my gig in California, that they were taking almost 20% of my gross. Right, it was $5,000 a month, and that that's a lot more than I wanted to pay for insurance.
Yeah.
So
insurance is the killer for any business, and I'm a plumber and I have my own business, and from what I was told by my broker, and he could be just blowing smoke to try to charge me more, but there's like insurance companies don't even want to cover plumbers anymore, and we're at the highest tier that you can be at,
right,
in terms of risk, because of what we deal with, and explosive material, water that could flip. So I pay when you're talking about what you're paying, I'm like, I'm feeling your pain, because it's ridiculous.
Well, that last landfill contract I had, they wanted a $20 million double day commercial liability policy, and it was going to cost more than they were paying me. And I said, absolutely not. And I said, look, my 2-pound birds aren't going to do any damage to your 20-ton bulldozers. $20 million is ridiculous. I ended up getting a $2 million double indemnity commercial liability policy plus $2 million in auto for 2 cars, and then workers' comp. California's workers' comp was pretty steep. I had to label my 2 employees as poultry workers because, again, there were no actuarial tables for falconers. Not that workers' comp matters, as far as what they're listed, it's how much you're paying them is what matters.
Yeah.
But that policy, those policies were $5,000 a month, and that's so.
That's insane.
Trying to find a similar policy, say in Georgia. Most insurance companies are just going to go, we're just not going to touch it. We don't understand it. So anyway, but yeah, I got out of abatement in 2009 when the vast majority of people started getting in, and since then, I think a lot of the guys that got in between 2009 and say 2015, 2016, when a lot of the regs were changing, have since gotten out. A lot of folks, really, it's a sideline, especially the agricultural guys. If you're doing a vineyard or a blueberry patch or something, you're working for a month. You're there for 2 weeks before harvest, 2 weeks of harvest, and that's it. Now, if you've got a vineyard that's growing at least 50 acres of Pinot Noir, and you can really sell them that you're going to increase their yield by 30%, et cetera, and they're willing to pay you $100 an hour, and you're willing to work 12 hours a day for a month, you'll make a nice chunk of change, especially if they don't require insurance. And most vineyards won't. But that's trying to get those contracts is really difficult, and there are plenty of California falconers ready to take them.
Right.
And driving across the country to go work for a month is, so I'm kind of done with it. There are a couple of, Steve Hine, last I heard, was doing some abatement at Sea Island, and Stuart Farron I believe has a contract at Atlanta Hartsfield Jackson. And I know them both. I've known them for years. Stuart Farron has been doing, critical control, trapping squirrels out of attics and that sort of thing for 20 years. So he has past performance in pest control. But mostly he flies goshawks. So what he's doing on Hartsfield Jackson with a goshawk in abatement, would make other abatement guys kind of look askance, I guess.
Yeah. I guess it's just an excuse to get paid to fly your goshawk.
Yeah, and he's there like 2 or 3 days a week.
Sounds nice to me.
Yeah, mind you, I bid on Atlanta Hartsfield Jackson many years ago, And unfortunately, the airfield manager 20 years ago was a really particularly crooked guy who flat out asked me to bribe him. Um, and but airports really, they're just looking to check a box with the FAA and say that they have an abatement program. Most of them assume that your bird is as dangerous to their aircraft as any of the other birds. Um, and I mean, really, the only saving grace really is the Air Force. The Air Force understands falconry. Um, the naval air stations have years ago they automatically go to the Department of Agriculture. And oddly enough, in the abatement world, the Department of Agriculture is the number one competitor. The Department of Agriculture will show up at an airport and say they're going to do a abatement, impact study, like a BASH, bird airstrike hazard evaluation. And the airport will say, okay, you've got a badge, go look. And then they'll say, gee, you have a real bad bird problem. You could either hire a contractor for $500,000, or you can hire us for 50 grand.
Yeah.
And of course, the airport will hire the Department of Agriculture. We'll then put an ad out, like in hunting magazines and whatnot, and hire a guy and hand him a brown shirt and a badge and say, go shoot everything there.
Yeah.
Now, mind you, the permits to depredate all that wildlife ought to come from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, which is the Department of the Interior, not the Department of Agriculture. And there is nothing of agricultural concern on an airport. So I think they're just making money.
Yeah, and a lot of people don't realize that when those contractors go in there, it's insane.
Yeah.
And there's a list. So you're allowed 20. You can shoot 20 bald eagles a year,
Right.
50 snowy owls a year, 200 red tails a year.
Right.
Like, it's like people don't realize that like these contractors are going out there and they have a permit to shoot bald eagles out of the sky because they're on an airport. It's insane to me.
I was working at McGuire Air Force Base up in New Jersey. McGuire is surrounded on three sides by Fort Dix, which is a huge Army base. And there was a pair of bald eagles that fished in all the golf course lakes on Fort Dix, because there were like 3 or 4 different golf courses on Fort Dix. Well, the male would fly over every day and hang out on one of the big radio towers right by the tower on McGuire Air Force Base. And the folks from the tower are like, hey, Alan, you got to do something about that eagle. I said, well, what the hell do you want me to do about it? And they're like, you got to get rid of him one way or the other. He's getting in the way of aircraft. And I called, Fish and Wildlife, and I'm looking at our depredation permit. And they said, well, it says all wildlife. And I said, look, I just moved back from Pakistan. Everybody here knows I'm a Muslim. If I shoot a bald eagle at this Air Force base, that all the Army guys that border that base think of as their mascot, and they love to see them sitting there while they're playing golf, they're going to hang me. I'm not doing it. And it took forever to figure out a way to harass that eagle enough to keep them away. But yeah, the thing is with Department of Agriculture, they write their own permits. I mean, they're the same. Really, it should be done by Department of Interior, by U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. But the Department of Agriculture just, if they'll say, we need to shoot 400 snowy owls this year. Well, I'm the authority. I've got the badge. And mind you, he's a $15 an hour guy that just got hired to go kill stuff. So like the Department of the Navy, every naval air station, they don't go to contractors. They go straight to the U.S. Department of Agriculture. So like you're not going to find any abatement falconers working on naval air stations ever. There's like but so the Air Force, they understand falconry.
They have their own program, don't they? The Air Force?
Well, no. I mean, they've got at the Air Force Academy. There's a falconry, thing that's sort of their mascot. And there have been a number of falconers that have been contracted to run that bird of prey center and falconry program. But no, none of the Air Force cadets like become falconers at air stations or anything like that.
So they have like it's like a little like hobby program mascot thing where they have jeers.
Yeah.
They fly them around.
It's just like they fly either a peregrine or a gerfalcon or something before a football game, just like Auburn does with their War Eagle. Obviously, Auburn having a veterinary school, their bird of prey center is a much bigger and meatier bird of prey center than the Air Force academies. The Air Force Academy has a few falcons. They tried 40 years ago to do a program, and then they decided just to leave it, to contract out to falconers. Mind you, when an Air Force base contracts out to falconers, they generally don't restrict it to falconry. They're looking for bird abatement services to include falconry or herding dogs or guns or pyrotechnics. Basically, they don't care what methods you use so long as you're effective. And really, they don't actually care if you're effective. They care that you're the lowest bidder with good past performance.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
That's all they care
They
about.
got to check the box, basically.
Right. Yeah. That's exactly right.
A buddy of mine was telling me that I guess it's USDA. They'll come out and shoot geese off of lakes. No problem.
Yeah. Well, I mean, who's going to stop you? I mean, you got a badge. It's not like a local game warden is going to arrest a federal officer, and Fish and Wildlife is going to say, "This is really our thing. Back off, agriculture." I mean, they just, they're not going to do that. So, and there's not much I think could ever be done about it anyway. But
It's insane. Like I'm going back and forth with Fish and Wildlife because I pulled a goshawk 2 weekends ago, and I'm waiting for the band number to come, because they give you the zip tie band and all this and that. And they're like, they're not harassing me, but you can see how seriously they're taking it. Okay, New York is asking me, are you issuing me a band? Are we giving you the band, or are you getting it from the other state? This bird has to be banded. Go, let me know when you get the band number, please. You have to follow up and send it, do the 3-186, and then add the band number later when it comes in the mail. And I'm like, and you see how seriously they take it. And then you got contractors on freaking airports just blasting bald eagles with shotguns, like with like zero, they get in the way of the planes, put a bullet in them. It's just like, I understand that they impede the traffic of air, you know what I mean? And we have to run the country, but it's like, there needs to be some sort of like I feel like there should be a balance. You know what I mean?
Well, yeah, I absolutely. I mean, and the thing is, so when my last contract, which was at a landfill in San Jose, they had the U.S. Geological Survey out counting gulls, and they'd been counting gulls for years, and those guys were shooting more pyrotechnics. They were shooting $50,000 worth of pyrotechnics a month. I was billing out at $31,000 a month, and I shot less than $5,000 worth of pyrotechnics a month. And when they're shooting 50 grand, when they called to hire me, and they told me how much pyro they were using, I said, "Well, stop." They said, "Well, we have to do something." I said, "Well, what you're doing isn't effective, and since I do use some pyro, you're just getting them habituated to the pyro. So just stop doing it until I get out there." Well, so Carly Schaefer was her name. She was she's a Canadian girl who worked for the U.S. Geological Service. So she's out there every couple of days counting gulls. There were radio trackers on a lot of them, so made it easier to count. Anyway, when I got there were 80,000 seagulls trying to feed off one working face of garbage every day. 80,000. Within 3 months, I had it down to 3,000 very controllable birds. Like if I showed up 20 minutes after dawn, there might be 3,000 birds there. And as soon as I pulled my truck up to the top of that landfill, they all left. And then, I'd have it down to about 100 controllable birds. and sometimes some migrants that didn't know me yet. And while there was a study done at JFK that every other year they'd use a shotgun, and every other year they'd use a falconer, and the study basically said they're equally as effective. I think in the long run, falconry is more effective because, in essence, what you're doing is you're teaching whatever the resident population of birds was that they don't own that space anymore, that you do, that you and your falcons own that space and it's too dangerous. So they don't really go that far away. They're just going to set up on the borders, and they're still going to be territorial. So any other migrating gulls or whatever you're harassing have to deal with them, that formerly resident population, and then deal with you. Whereas if you just shoot everything, all the attractants, whether it's at a landfill or an airport, are still there. So in essence, what you've just done is put out a vacancy sign. If you just go out and shoot everything, well, you're going to have to shoot everything next week that has come in to replace it. Whereas if you sort of train and whatever that resident population of birds is to not be there, they will then help train any migrants that would come and replace them. And so I think falconry is more effective. And if there was sort of a falconry abatement union that could get that message across to civilian airports, the agriculture might be different just because it's so seasonal, but landfills, that sort of thing, it might become a better, the money might come back. The issue then would also be really instructing falconers that want to get into abatement how to really do abatement and how it's different than regular falconry. And that's not too difficult. It's easy enough to, if you're a decent enough falconer to even attempt it, if you can fly a big long wing, then I think you can be taught sort of the theory behind behind abatement that makes it work. Anyway, but yeah, so I haven't done abatement in many years.
Yeah, it was a nice little tangent. It's just, if you just keep going down the rabbit hole talking about it, the whole thing is just, because it takes an airplane like 30 minutes to get to its cruising altitude on average. Well, the airport's not really the biggest risk. It's the surrounding area is also the biggest risk.
Yeah. It's the whole aerodrome. So I was in a BASH meeting at March Air Base, and the QA of my contract did not like me. And at the BASH meeting, he said that there had been 42 bird strikes. And I said, what are you talking about? There had only been 2, and both of them were at night. And he's like, no, there have been 42. And I said, in this quarter, you're crazy. And he starts putting them up. Thankfully, the base commander, the general, was a very cool guy and sitting right next to me. And he starts putting them up. And I said, that one's in I said, you're listing a bird strike at Hickam. That's in Hawaii. And he said, well, it was one of our aircraft. I said, well, we're not talking about our aircraft. We're talking about this aerodrome, right? We're talking about this airbase. Right? It's my BASH meeting. I know you're the QA of my contract, but let's just talk about the bird strikes that happened within 2.5 miles of here, because that's sort of what I'm responsible for. And the fact that one of our airplanes from our squadron was flying into Hawaii and hit a bird somewhere near Honolulu, there ain't nothing I can do about that. So, but that's the other thing is, a shotgun has a very limited range. So you're really only dealing with stuff right above the airport. But, I generally, I'm a big fan of a female Deer Prairie falcon. I've had several of them. If you've got a really good imprint female Deer Prairie, her circle around you is going to be, half a mile in each direction, easy, if not 2 or 3. Especially when she's a few years old and has a lot more confidence. She'll be doing a 5-mile circle, and about 1,800 feet in the air, and everything around that airport's gonna get scared away. Um, and and once you start scooping over a lure in the middle of the airfield, you're not gonna see anything flying.
Yeah. I did it. I helped a friend of mine, Eric Swanson, out. He's got the contract down in Ocean City. And he asked me to help him out. He was having trouble getting guys like maybe 3-4 years ago. So I went down and helped him out. And we flew the Harris Hawks, and they'd move light post to light post, and you'd watch the gulls leave, and then you'd watch them move, and then the gulls would leave again. But there was like a little bubble around the Harris Hawks.
Right.
As soon as we took out, the Jeer hybrids, and that thing just goes, 50 feet over the boardwalk, out of sight, and then cuts up and starts looping. You just see all the gulls just like going out to sea. They're just gone. They're out of there. And I'm like, well, why do we even have the Harris Hawks? He's like, well, if we have the Harris Hawks, that lets people see them more up close, and it helps with PR and stuff like that. And it's, but he's like, yeah, obviously the Falcons are the most effective method.
Every landfill I worked at, every airport I worked at, every airbase I worked at some point there was a field trip full of school kids or Boy Scouts or something like that. And I'd get asked by whatever PR officer or site manager, hey, could you let them see the birds and do some stuff? And, so at the moment, in my muse, I've got 8 birds. I've got 6 falcons and I've got 2 Harris Hawks. So I've got my pair of Harris Hawks. Really, I'm about to put them out to breed because, well, my male is 14 years old, and all spring and summer, all he does is masturbate on a perch looking at my female. Just bangs away at it going, look what I can do. I'll show you how much I love you. And he's also kind of a jerk. On a really cold winter's day, I could walk half a mile from my truck, and if he doesn't want to fly, he's going to fly right back and sit on the rack on the top of my truck, and just like, I know you're going to feed me, and I know you're going to come back eventually. So screw this hunting business. Just put me in the truck, turn the heat on. I think Harris Hawks generally, once they're about 6 years old, they start training you.
Right.
But I've got a Jeer Prairie, an imprint female Jeer Prairie. I've got a Saker Peregrine, a Saker, a Jeer Saker, little male. This was his first year. I've got my only wild bird is a female prairie. And then I just got this Jeer Peregrine. He's a Cassini and Autumn
Nice.
Jeer. And he's super cool. He's a great bird. So now my only falconry gig, since I'm not doing abatement, I'm the official falconer of the Atlanta Falcons football team. And their lawyers don't want me to fly a bird. They're scared to death of flying a bird in the stadium, even though plenty of other people do it. So really, I'm stand there and get your picture taken with me and a bird. And I've threatened just to bring my Harris Hawks, just because, who's going to know the difference?
Yeah, they're all falcons to the general public.
I have an assistant. She just got her general permit, and mostly she's there to take pictures. As people walk up, and she'll take their camera and take a picture of the group, and then as we move from one location to another, from a few hours before the game to opening of the doors, and then at halftime, she's just carry one of the 2 birds because I always bring a couple of birds. At any rate, we have a running tally of how many times somebody asks me at an Atlanta Falcons game why I have an owl. And any of a number of other sort of ridiculous questions. Like everyone, we get was it injured? Is it a rescue? Why do I have an eagle? Why do I have a hawk? And you kind of have to. I remember one of my first gigs was at a training camp. So like spring training, it's all super fans, season ticket holders that are special that won some lottery to get a ticket to go visit training camp. And I'm standing there, and this little kid asked me why I had an owl, and I said, "Well, it's not an owl." And I said, "Where are you?" And he said, "Football." I said, "Right, but who's playing?" Atlanta. Right, but what's their mascot? Freddie. Right, but what team is Atlanta's team? Atlanta. Yeah, and just it was a circular logic, and I was like, trying to get him to say the word falcon without me saying no, this is a falcon, and then I realized how pointless that was, and
Yeah.
like, okay,
Yeah.
just smile and let me take the picture and move along,
Yeah.
and your mom can explain it to you later.
Yeah. She won't know either, but it's okay.
No, she probably wouldn't know. Unless somebody says, "Oh, you were at a Falcons game and you took a picture with a Falcon." That's great.
Yeah.
I had no idea you're the falconer for the Falcons. That's cool.
Yeah, that's just been for the last 2 seasons. So what happened was 15 years ago, the Atlanta Zoo had a contract with both the Atlanta Falcons and the Atlanta Hawks. And so they would fly a Lanner Falcon around at the old Georgia Dome Stadium for the Falcons games, and then fly a Harris Hawk around at the Atlanta Hawks games. And older Harris Hawk that was feeling, like he was going to train you, went and flew up and sat on the big Globotron, scoreboard way above the game, and didn't come down for quite a while. And the corporate masters said to this guy, "Go get your bird." And he said, "No, you don't understand. The bird needs to come to me. I don't go to him." And he said, "We don't care. Go get him." So he goes up a couple of elevators and escalators to try and get up near there. Of course, the bird then goes looking for him and lands on the goalpost during the game.
Oh my God.
On the back of the backboard of the basketball, and interrupts the game and made all the news. So of course the Atlanta Hawks fired him and the zoo. And when the Falcons said, "Well, if the Hawks fired you, we'll fire you too." And so they haven't had a Falconer for 15 years. And so 2 years ago, some guys, called the Chattahoochee Nature Center and said, "Can you bring a falcon?" And Catherine Dudek, who is the main rehabber at that nature center, is a friend of mine. We've been friends for well over 30 years. And she said, "No, I can't, but Alan can." So they called me, and I said, "Yes, I can do that. And let's talk turkey." And they've been very good to me. And so I've been doing it for 2 years now.
That's awesome.
So this is season 3.
That's your main gig these days?
Well, I just quit I was a paralegal for the last 5 years, and I just quit that back in October, since I'm moving out 2 hours northeast of here to build my little bed and breakfast. So at the moment it's the only paycheck, but I'm hoping my hotel takes off.
Well, we'll plug it on the show.
Yeah. It'll be called the Muse at Elberton.
Oh, that's nice. I like
That's
that.
cool. That's a good name.
Well, I figure it'll be a nice little wedding venue and falconry intensive bed and breakfast. So 5 couples want to rent the space. All the food will be farm to table, and we'll do Friday do a lot of little meet and greet with all the birds, and do some safety talk and whatnot. And then Saturday morning it'll be flying birds until lunch, and then fly different birds, and then a big dinner, and then Sunday same sort of thing until they go home. Or if a couple wants to, somebody wants to rent it for a wedding, I'll fly the rings down to you by Harris Hawk, and I'll release doves as you leave. That sort
That's
of thing.
nice.
Yeah,
that's awesome. Yeah, that's it right there, man. You get that taken off, and you're booked up every weekend. That's life.
Knock on wood, right?
Yeah, that's nice, man.
Yeah.
So
Inshallah.
Yeah.
Aaron.
All right. So
okay, go ahead, Aaron.
I wanted to explore your falconry experience in the Middle East.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yes.
So, my first trip to Pakistan, I was right after my freshman year in college. So I've been flying birds for about 4 years at that point. And at that point, just red-tailed hawks. But I've been hooked in falconry since I was 7. And my best friend in high school, at least my junior and senior year, was a guy from Karachi. And his family still lived in Karachi, and his younger sister, who I had a crush on. and they all invited me to come, visit. So I did. And, I was also on a mission to buy bells. At the time, the Georgia Falconry Association had a couple of guys that would, this was back when Northwoods was, printing a catalog that was just paper, didn't even have a glossy exterior, so falconry gear, we all made everything, with the exception, there were a couple of guys that were pretty good welders that would modify a Sampo swivel for you. But, or you just buy a really large Sampo, but with the exception of a few hood makers or whatever, and swivels and scales, everybody just made everything else. And I still pretty well stick to that. I mean, I make everything. I find when anybody who's like buying really super cool and pricey jesses, I call them MasterCard falconers, So anyway, I went to Pakistan because I figured I'd buy bells and cool falconry gear super cheap, and sort of fell in love with the place. I only spent a month, my first trip, and I bought a bunch of bells and absolutely the cheapest hoods you've ever seen in your life. Some of which I still have and still use as rufter hoods. And I bought a block perch that is still in use. So I bought that in 1994, and it's still outside and still, I've recovered the top with AstroTurf because it was carpet, and that carpet only lasted a few years, but the block itself I still use. So I work for the Pakistan National Olympic Committee. I was their sort of liaison officer with the Atlanta Committee for the Olympic Games. And so then I went back. I'd made friends all over Pakistan at that point. So in '97, I went back, and started off in Karachi. Went up to Lahore, went to Islamabad, drove up to Peshawar, and then down through the desert. And met a lot of falconers, bought a lot of stuff. Did a little side trip to India. Spent a few days in Abu Dhabi and in Dubai and in Sharjah and in Bahrain and in Muscat. Made lots of friends. Saw some falconry, but I wasn't really there long enough. And then I decided, I'd seen lots of different kinds of falconry, especially in Pakistan, because fully 1 million Arabs live in Karachi. Karachi's 12.5 million people, but there are 1 million Arab speakers that live and work there, or at least hang out. And so a lot of Arab falconers that, just like you have sort of the sort of beach bum American falconer that wants to go fly long wings and hunt grouse, and so they don't really live anywhere in particular. They just drive around, Idaho and Montana and Wyoming, and living out of the back of their truck with a couple of birds, and all they're doing is hunting, prairie chickens or sharp-tailed grouse or sage grouse, whatever. So there's sort of that with Arab falconers in Karachi. So they'll fly to Karachi and have a place there, and they'll buy a bird, have it trained up. Usually they don't train their own birds, and then they'll hunt hubara out in the Sindh province, out in the Thar Desert of Pakistan, for 3 months, and then they'll go home. Because it's sort of like just going to the good hunting grounds.
Question. Quick question. Sorry to interrupt you. So the hubara, are they native wildlife in hubara, or are they stocked in that area?
No. They're native. Yeah.
Okay.
Like Pakistan hasn't really started breeding the bustard yet.
Okay. But the numbers are stable enough for the regular everyday falconer to go out and chase them.
Well, I didn't say that.
Okay. All right. Okay. All right.
Let's say they're a lot more stable and a lot more plentiful than on the Arab Peninsula.
Okay. That was my question. Okay.
And the other thing is, you're also sort of beating them to the punch, because like almost every bird that is a migrant in the Arab Peninsula is flying through Pakistan and Iran or Iraq, depending on east-west, before it hits there. So like, anyway, so because I saw so much different kinds of falconry, I said, I'm going to move to Pakistan. So I picked up and I moved. I rented a house. in Karachi in 2001. I actually didn't have any intention of coming back, but 9/11 happened, and then things got really weird, and bad stuff happened, and I said, okay, time to come home. But and I came home end of January 2002. But prior to that, so my house was a block and a half away from the beach, and I would take shikras, which are kind of a half step between our sharp-shinned hawk and our Cooper's hawk. Literally, shikra means hunter, so a shikra baz means a hunter's hawk. And I'd go throw them at quail along the beach, because all the quail that are, especially in the fall and winter, as they're migrating south, they'll stop in the beaches in Pakistan and eat sea oats and get fat before they then cross the Arabian Sea and hit the Arab Peninsula, and they'll stay there for a couple of days before they hit Africa. So with Hubara, just like same with falcons, the notion of like getting a Saker falcon from Saudi Arabia, if it's a wild Saker falcon, it probably hatched in Russia, and then flew through Kyrgyzstan or Kazakhstan or Tajikistan and through Afghanistan and through Pakistan, and it may have been trapped in Saudi Arabia, but it's not a Saudi bird. So with Hubara, well, you're just going slightly north and a little east to Pakistan to go get them early. So I wouldn't say their numbers are better. It's you're just going to the source. But anyway, so besides long winging for Hubara, and I found that was really cutthroat. Everybody's got their, they're hunting crew, and they're sort of, this is my ground, and I don't want you hunting in it. I got a little Toledo peregrine, a little Tearsal peregrine, and there was a row of restaurants in Karachi called Boat Basin. It's up against a salt marsh that was a boat basin at some point, I guess. And there were lots of little lesser flamingos. Thousands of them, and nobody was hunting them. And it's not like there are any real laws in Pakistan, or if there are, nobody obeys any of them. So, and I had in my possession a couple of crappy little pink flamingo yard sculpture things, like every Floridian has. And so I used those as kind of a beginning lure to train my little Colitis Tearsal, and then I started hunting flamingos.
Wow, that's awesome.
But I went to Pakistan with a Harris hawk. I had a 6-year-old Harris hawk at that point, I guess. Yeah, she was about 6. And so I was flying her. She then suffered a compound fracture of the humerus, so she got put, on the injured list, and just I did a surgery, put a pin in her wing, and she was fine. Almost a year later, she was back flying. She got a little arthritic a couple years later there, and then she got killed by a red tail. So besides my Harris hawk, I had 3 goshawks. Not all at the same time.
What kind?
I got Pakistani goshawks. I had a male and female immature pair. The male died, and I ordered another one. So trapping and falconry are very different in Pakistan. Some falconers, like my buddy Salman Ali, probably the finest falconer I know, does everything. And he and I used to go trap birds and scare the hell out of them and release them, and then try and trap them again some other way and show them all the tricks, because there are a large number of professional trappers in Pakistan throughout the country, and they will trap birds especially once birds get down to the south to Karachi. They'll trap a bunch of birds, and if they've got buyers lined up, they'll call their buyers and say, "Hey, I've got a Saker or a Lanner or a Luger or a Peregrine or whatever. got what you're looking for, got your, goshawk, whatever. If they don't, those birds end up at Empress Market, which makes the Wuhan wet market look quite clean.
Yeah, I've seen the videos.
And so, and then like there was a French lady lived around the corner from me who had a huge menagerie. She bought every kind of critter imaginable, and she had a couple of predatory birds, but she had every species of wildlife in Pakistan in cages in her backyard. And they were all bought at Empress Market, and you know, um, but a lot of them don't make it.
Yeah. Could you? I'm sorry, Alan. Could you describe
Yeah.
Empress Market for the listeners?
So Empress Market is a huge mostly open air market in the center of Karachi. And you can buy everything from pots and pans to, shoes to clothing to, motorcycle and car parts to every species of animal imaginable. I mean, monkeys. So there's I guess it's there's a fairly popular monkey that's in Karachi, and a lot of people keep them as pets. And then, dogs and cats, and then, livestock, sheep, donkeys, whatever. And then there'll be several guys selling birds, and some of them are cage birds, but every predatory bird is there. And then, there'll be a guy selling quail, and some are farm raised and some are wild trapped. Same with pigeons and all that. So you have to be real careful. Like when I would buy quail, or pigeons, the pigeons, it was okay if they were sort of farm raised. But the quail you wanted wild trap, because the farm raised are going to be so full of disease, and you're especially frounce, um, and really you're going to have to clean them up before you use them. But what I would do was very sort of traditional falconry stuff. So, like I said, there are a million Arab falconers and they generally don't trap their own bird. They don't even train their own bird. They hire a Pakistani falconer to train their birds. Well, if you're a very wealthy Arab and you say to your Pakistani falconer, I'll pay you, $50 a month to train my birds. And he'll say, well, I'm going to need food money for the birds as well. And I'll say, okay, fine. I'll give you, a quail's about, 20 rupees or 12 rupees, something like that. So 12 rupees per day per bird. Well, what he'll do is as he's training your birds, he'll save some of that money because, he might not, your old tearful peregrine isn't going to eat a whole quail every day, especially when you're getting them down to weight and, training them. So he'll hold back some of that money and he'll go to Empress Market and he'll buy a shikra. And then he'll take that shikra, mostly feed it scraps from the falcons that he's working, with, get it trained up, and then he'll go throw it at quail, out in the desert. And if he bags 4 or 5 quail in a day, well, that's, 5 days worth of food money that he's pocketing. So I had 3 goshawks, but I had 2 shikras. I had 2 red-headed merlins, a lugger, a Colitis peregrine, and then my Harris hawk. And so I would every day I'd take one of my shikras first thing in the morning, and I'd go down to the beach and I'd get a cup of tea and have a cigarette. I'd throw them musketry style, throw them like a dart. And on good days I'd take 6, 7, 8 quail. Bad days I'd take 1 or 2. And I'd go home and I'd pull out the other one, give the quail a break to settle back, change my shoes or whatever, get some of the sand off me, whatever. And I'd walk back. I only lived a block and a half from the beach. So I'd take the other one out and I'd go throw her at quail and fill my freezer. And yeah, some days I still had to go buy quail either at Empress Market or, I finally got a couple of quail guys that were, trapping quail, and I'd get those. But having that little accipiter to do most of the work for you was real nice. I mean, it's not pretty falconry, but
The fine pretty. It's all. I think that's pretty
Yeah,
cool.
right, exactly. I mean, like it's sort of like telling somebody what a good wine is. Well, a good wine is the one you like, right?
Right.
And so it's very subjective. But yeah, I mean, there's throwing something that's basically like a big Sharpie or a small Cooper's Hawk at quail in the sand dunes. It's not. It's tens, half a second of adrenaline as opposed to flying a big long wing that's starts her circle at 400 feet in the air and it'll ring up to 1,800 feet in the air and then smash a duck. It's
I don't know. The dart hawking sounds pretty exhilarating to me. I'm gonna have to disagree with you.
So, well, what I'm saying is that it's a shorter high.
I see what you're saying. I see what you're saying.
It's an instantaneous high as opposed to a wow, this is really cool.
But you can go all day with the accipiter. You're not going all day with the long wing.
Oh, well,
you can stretch that high out for longer.
Well, more it's like you have 10 or 15 highs over the course of a few days or over the course of a few hours. Whereas with the big long wing, you've got half an hour
of high,
of really cool.
Yeah, I got you.
So but I mean, we're all drug addicts,
yes.
So you just got to think which is your drug of choice, right? So are you a long winger? Are you a short winger? Are you a broad winger? I'm all three. But it's nice when you can do both. So like if you're or all three at the same time. So in the mornings I'd find my shikras and I'd load up my freezer, and then depending on the weather, I'd take out my Harris Hawk. That was before she broke her wing, but when she was still flying, mostly I was trying to hunt. They call them teether. Teether's usually there are a couple of kinds of pheasants. One's the black francolin, and we weren't terribly successful. I mean, mostly I just didn't see any. There weren't a lot around, but I did take some sucker partridge with her.
That's cool.
I took some rabbits with her, and then or I'd fly my red-headed merlins. Now, red-headed merlins, in my opinion, if anybody's really wanting to get into importing birds to the U.S., red-headed merlins would be the bird to do.
Yep.
So red-headed merlins, you take any two, doesn't matter age or gender, perch them out. Like if each of you had one, you get together to go hunting, you go sit in the yard for half an hour, perch them out, 10, 15 feet away from each other, maybe 5 feet away from each other, just to where they can't get at each other for about half an hour. And they'll squawk and bluster and yell at each other. And really, they're just sorting out who's going to do the flushing and who's going to do the killing. And then you go fly them. And they will hunt cooperatively, just like Harris Hawks.
Wow.
And the thing is, so they're big. They're not, I think, I don't like calling them the redneck falcon just because I'm from Georgia and we have a lot of rednecks. And I prefer the name red-headed merlin. They're not really a merlin.
No?
No.
They fly differently?
They fly very differently. They're far more like a peregrine. They're not the desert falcon like a saker, a gyr, or a merlin. They're not fluffy and soft. They're very hard feathered.
Like a peregrine.
Like a peregrine. But they have almost a kestrel-like tail, and they have the longest toes proportional to body size of any predatory bird, or at least of any falcon. It looks like they're wearing skis. And with a pair of red-headed merlins, I routinely took small ducks, about the size of like American wood ducks. Imagine any American falconer with a merlin or two merlins taking ducks. Does not happen, right? I mean, like any guy says, "Oh yeah, I took a duck with my merlin," you go, "You're a liar." That's not true.
Right.
But with red-headed merlins, or with a pair of red-headed merlins, you can. Now, I'm not going to say you're going to take mallards. That ain't happening. But like small teal, yeah, you can do it. And because they're so little, like as far as the future of falconry goes, I could see folks like, as we continually lose hunting grounds across this country, and as urban sprawl takes over, I could see guys living in Manhattan in high rise buildings to have a pair of red-headed merlins on a shelf perch, a couple of shelf perches in the living room. Take them down, get on the subway, and find any little hedgerow or Central Park. You can fly stuff as small as sparrows. You can fly stuff as
Oh no.
Oh man, I was getting fired up, man. That is cool.
Yeah, man.
That's incredible.
All right.
Shall we get back to Pakistan and cool
let's
birds
get
there?
Me and Casey both had a question. We wanted to know a little more about people being territorial over the Hubara fields.
Well, I didn't really experience anything particularly ugly other than the, subtle mention of I hunt there with the implied you don't. But, I'd seen enough stuff having been to Pakistan many times before that I could, you can. I'll say this about Pakistani culture. They're not subtle, right? Like, there are almost no Western tourists in Pakistan. I speak Urdu. I've been learning Urdu since the early '90s. So, like it's really easy to spot. Oddly enough, they call him a chakarbaz, which is a hawk that hunts chukar partridge, right? The chakarbaz is sort of a thief or a cheap guy or whatever. Um, uh, it's really easy to spot them, and know what's up, and it's also really easy to understand an implied threat. It doesn't. They're not veiling it too heavily. So, like I'll tell you. So, right after I moved into my house, when I first moved to Pakistan in 2001, I was in a Hotel Metropole in downtown Karachi, and I'm looking at houses, and all the real estate guys are wondering why the hell I was looking at houses instead of apartments because I'm a single guy. And I was like, well, I need a yard for my birds. And anyway, so I rented this house. And as soon as I get into the house, I still had a container. I had a 20-foot container with everything I owned. I shipped my Fiat Spider to Pakistan along with everything else I owned. I ended up driving that car to the Indian border after 9/11 just to make sure I could do it. It's a great rally car. Anyway, so I get settled in my house, and I have this Harris Hawk that's she's a golden retriever. I trust her implicitly. I'd had her for 6 years at that point. She'd been pent up in this hotel room for a couple of weeks, so I'm flying her in the yard just to let her stretch her wings a bit. Just back and forth between a perch and the glove. Well, as soon as I bring her out, and as soon as her first flight hit, she flies from the perch to the glove. Dozens of kites and crows come down and mob her. So red kites are everywhere in Karachi. They're like pigeons at St. Marcus Square, Marcus Square in Venice. There are thousands of them, and they will mob your bird. You got to get out and away from them to get away from them. And so she goes up over my house and the next street over, and so I'll go running like an idiot chasing her. And this is where I start meeting a bunch of neighbors. Well, long story short, folks sort of the next street over, the servants snatched her up and then extorted me for some money to pay him back. In that time, Crown Prince Mohammed of Abu Dhabi, I'd knocked on his door. Well, not really, but their gate guard. I'm running around swinging a lure, screaming my head off and whistling, trying to get my Harris Hawk back. And this dude, who, mind you, he was an Arab soldier, but Urdu speaking as well, said, well, what the hell are you doing? And I said, I'm looking for my bird. And he says, well, you can't have any of ours. And I'm like, I don't want any of yours. I want mine. And we had this weird miscommunication. I was like, whatever, dude. And I continued looking for my bird. Well, 2 days later, I get my bird back. I paid these guys, less than $100. I wasn't really worried about it. I didn't like their attitude though. So once I got her back, I walked back over to it's Sheikh Zayed's hunting palace. So Sheikh Zayed, who was the king of the United Arab Emirates, had a hunting palace in Karachi, and his son, Crown Prince Mohammed, and then Abdul Aziz and a couple other of the sons would spend 3 months a year there hunting. So I go back to that gate guard to say, see, this is the bird I was looking for. I've got my bird back. He says, wait 1 minute. And he runs in, he comes back, and he invites me in, and they set out a block, and there's 9 Saker falcons sitting there on blocks with bath pans. They put out a bath pan, and Crown Prince Mohammed comes out. And I sit and have tea with him, and we talk for a while, and he's like, so what's this whole story? I said, well, my bird got mobbed by a bunch of kites. And then the neighbors down the road snatched her up and, they wanted some money. And I talked them down to like $50 or whatever, $100. And he's like, they took money from you. I said, yeah. They said, no, 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 no. We're not having this. And he rattles off in Arabic to one of his guards. And he runs out. Next thing I hear a bunch of yelling out in the yard. We're on the second floor. And like 15 guys jump into a Toyota pickup truck with guns and go a block away. And I'm like, well, hey, what's going on? And Crown Prince Mohammed just passed me on the leg and says, don't worry, I have it. I said, hey, man, you're not going to make me any friends in the neighborhood this way. He goes, Alan, they got you for $50 or $100. I don't remember really. I think it was $50. He said, they don't know you because you're nobody. They know who I am. If they think they can take $100 off you, what do you think they're going to try and get from me? We're not having this. Right? Well, I never saw those guys again. And it turns out that they were the servants for my friend Salman's nephew or a cousin or whatever. Right? They live next door to my friend Salman. And I told Salman that story when we met. He goes, no, I know. And he's like, they were my, cousins, servants. I'm like, oh, okay. I was like, what happened? And he's like, don't ask. And that was it. And I never asked again. So I don't know if the, the guards for the Emirati royal family went and whacked him out or just beat the hell out of him or what. I don't want to know. But if a falconer says, hey, that's my bird, that's his bird. He says, that's my hunting ground. That's his hunting ground. So, it's one thing if they they'll absolutely invite you. I mean, Salman would invite me hunting with him all the time. Mohammed and Abdul Aziz and I, we went to Dubai together to go to the falcon auctions. I mean, once you're invited, you're invited. If you're not invited, you're not invited.
Right.
There's no confusion,
So I had a question because you're telling this amazing story, and I'm just curious, like, what was it like when you first arrived there, or even visiting? Were our Americans well received there?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it doesn't occur to them that you're an American. It occurs to them that you're like. I'll take my very first trip to Pakistan in '94. I had just enough Urdu to take a cab. And because of I bought the cheapest consolidated ticket that had 15 stops, and I missed the flight, so they put me on a more direct flight. So I actually arrived 12 hours early. And I got to the house when nobody was there. The servants let me in. They figured out who I was. And everything was fine. And another friend of mine from England shows up, and he and I go to. There was a shrine near the house I was staying in, and we go to see it. And out back, there's 2 football fields worth of dirt, and circles of people smoking hash. So Zafar and I go and sit and smoke hash. And I'm dressed in a shalwar kameez, whatever. And the guys on either side of me are looking at me, trying to figure out where I'm from. And they first started speaking to me in Pashto. Mind you, I spoke very little Urdu at the time, but I couldn't even tell what language. And my friend Zafar says, they're speaking Pashto. So, I don't speak Pashto. So they switched to Russian. I recognized it as Russian, but I don't speak Russian. So then they switched to German. Now, I speak enough German that I can reply. And this guy looks at me and he says, I don't think you're German. I said, I'm not. He said, I think you're English. I said, you're right. So he continued speaking English. Well, over the course of the night, that same guy, mind you, this is a beggar. These are poor people. He probably couldn't write his name in any of these languages. Also spoke Sindhi, Saraiki, Hindko, Punjabi, Balochi, Dari, and Urdu, just as people would come by to buy hash from him or whatever. Um, so, like, Pakistan learned a long time ago, probably around partition when India and Pakistan and Bangladesh all separated from Britain, that white Western tourists aren't going to the Islamic Republic if it doesn't matter where it's on. They're just not. The only Western tourists that were tourists that I ever encountered in Pakistan were mountain climbers going to climb K2. I met some Brits that were being punished by whatever corporation they worked for to go work in Pakistan. I met some folks that had married Pakistanis and were living in Pakistan and were like me and realized that it was actually a really cool place. But yeah, I mean Pakistani as far as being well received, I'll give you a great example. In '97, I'd rented a Lada made Jeep. Like it looked like almost like a little Suzuki Samurai or something, a little piece of shit Jeep. And I was driving from Peshawar, way up in the Northwest Frontier Province, to a town called Dera Ismail Khan, which are these ruined. It's like a ruined city, but the architecture is really beautiful, and the tile work that's still up is really beautiful. So my Jeep breaks down, break a fan belt. I've got huge mountains to my right and open nothing desert to my left. And I know the last little wide spot in the road, sort of a town, is at least 25 miles behind me. And there's nothing in front of me. And there's nobody. And I'm cussing at the truck and, trying to figure out something that could be used as a fan belt. And these two kids come walking by, two little boys. One's about 12, one's maybe 8 or 9. And by this time, my Urdu was better. But these are Pashto speakers. But they also, they learned Urdu in school and all that. So they asked me who I am and what I'm doing. I said, well, I'm a traveler and I'm going to Dar es Khan and my truck broke down. And they said, oh, okay. And they keep walking. And 2 hours later, they come back. And now the 12-year-old kid's got a rifle across his shoulder and a big bedroll. And they're both carrying these tins of food. And the 12-year-old says, we would invite you back to the house, but all the men are gone and you're an adult. So we can't have you come with my mom and my sisters and stuff. So we're going to protect you here. I'm looking, I was in my 20s. I'm looking at this 12-year-old, this 8-year-old. I'm like, I could kill you with my toes. You're going to protect me. And they're like, oh, yeah, there are lots of bandits. They pitch a tent against my Jeep and they start a fire, heat up the food, roll out bedrolls. And they wouldn't let me take my turn on watch duty. And they protected me until morning. And then, I get up and I start making wudu, like cleaning and making prayers. And they're like, we didn't know you were a Muslim. I said, you didn't ask. I said, oh, we thought you were an American. I said, I am. And they said, you're an American and a Muslim? And I went, yeah. I went, oh, okay. We didn't know that was a thing. Look, it is. So we walk about 4 miles down to the village. They hired a guy with a couple of donkeys to drag my Jeep to the mechanic shop. And then they had a guy fix the fan belt or replace the fan belt. And I paid for nothing because I was their guest. So I drove around the block and said, I want you to be my guest. And I took him to lunch just to repay the favor. But, it occurred to me that if I were, wrecked on the side of the road anywhere in the U.S., probably 1,000 people would pass by before anybody would stop. And if somebody stopped, they might go, "Yeah, you can use my cell phone," but they're not gonna, stay with you all night long to protect you from bandits until you can get someplace and then pay for everything. You know, I mean, and not little kids. And so yeah, they're very, very hospitable people.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%. They're well known for being very hospitable, that culture. Yeah, for sure. So you're well received. So nowadays, if me and Aaron said, "Hey, we're going to go over there and fly some birds and visit," would you recommend that?
Absolutely.
Okay.
I'll put you in touch with guys to take you around and show you around. Yeah. I mean, like, I recommend anybody who like starts talking about how they want to go to India, I tell them to go to Pakistan instead. Because India to me has sort of sold off a lot of its culture for the popular misconception of its culture, right? Whereas like nothing, not 1 foot of track has been laid in Pakistan since 1947. So all the trains, like if you want to see what British India was, go to Pakistan, right? If you go to India and you go see the Taj Mahal, you'll have one unobstructed view, and the rest was tourist trap hell. I mean, thousands upon thousands of people trying to sell you little models of the Taj Mahal or slides of the whatever. But if you're in Lahore, Pakistan, and you go to Badshah Masjid, it's a mosque built by the same guy that built the Taj Mahal. His name was Shah Jahan, and it's just a really old mosque. And on Fridays, it's full of people praying. But any other day of the week, the imam will take you on tour, and there's a little pretty rundown museum that's part of it. And you can throw a few rupees into a bucket to help them keep it up. But you'll get a private tour of the place just because he's got nothing better to do. And architecturally, it's very similar. I mean, it's that Mughal architecture, beautiful building, but there aren't any tourists to compete with. It's not like you're getting a tour guide that you schedule through some online trip thing. Is you showed up at the mosque and one of the imams there said, "Well, let me show you around." I mean, so yeah, I totally recommend going to Pakistan.
What was it like post 9/11?
Huh?
What was it like post 9/11? Because earlier you alluded to getting out of there because it got weird.
Yeah, so post 9/11 got really weird because the Americans basically took over every airport, and there were military at every intersection of the road, and like my neighbors. So my house in Karachi is in a neighborhood called Defense. Every Pakistani city, one of the nicest neighborhoods is the Defense Housing Authority. So the houses are built for the military, generally for the army, and then they sell them. And like my neighborhood in Karachi was full of consulates. So the Taliban consulate was 15 doors down from me. I knew the consul general pretty well. And President Musharraf's sister was right across the street. Her son and I are still in touch. We're not really friends anymore, unfortunately. But there was just a lot of tension that and some real nasty stuff happened in December, and it was time to go. But anyway, but certainly, I would absolutely go back. I maintain a number of friendships there, and I'm partial to Karachi because that's where I spent most of my time. But and I like the beach and the desert. But tour the whole country, and you'll see every kind of falconry ever thought of. I mean, from throwing small accipiters. My goshawks. So I've got 2 immature goshawks, a male and a female, and the male died a couple of weeks later. And I was talking to Salman, and Anyway, so he appeared. He's like, "Oh, we got you a new goshawk," and it's a mature male. And I'm arguing with him that, why are you bringing me a sexually mature bird? That's something we don't do in the States. And he's like, well, it's done here. You said male goshawk. This is male goshawk. You didn't say an immature bird. You bought it. You contracted for it. You bought it. I said, okay. I said, I'm just going to cut its testes off and let it go. And he said, well, you could do that. And he's like, you could give it to me and I'll have it professionally trained. And I said, well, okay. So I did. Well, I get this bird back 3.5, 4 weeks later, and it's a golden retriever. I mean, it's snug. Like if I'm asleep on the couch, it's snuggling up behind my knees. I mean, it just was. I've never seen, especially in a sipiter. Mind you, those 3 goshawks were my sum total of experience with goshawks. I live in Georgia, and I've lived in Pennsylvania and New Jersey and California, but I've never flown an American goshawk. But to have a goshawk that was cuddly, I mean, like more loyal than my Harris hawk, was just like it. Everything I'd read about accipiters was a lie. you know. Um, anyway, in Pakistan, you're going to see everything from the musketry of throwing small accipiters to flying big accipiters at chucker partridge and francolin and pheasants and also desert hares, to a few guys flying eagles, not very many, to flying long wings. What you won't see is broad-winged. Nobody flies broad-wings. Their broad-wings aren't very good to begin with. They have, long-legged buzzard and the white-eyed buzzard, and they're really sort of lizard killers. I'd kind of like, if I were living in Pakistan again, I might try to do something with them. But Pakistani falconers in general really look down their nose at broadwings.
Our mutual friend Mushtaba Raja.
Raja,
yeah, Raja. When he got into falconry here and he got his red-tailed hawk, his dad, being Pakistani, was like embarrassed.
Yeah.
Of the red-tailed hawk.
Right.
He said he was like visibly disgusted and said that's a buzzard, and he wouldn't take pictures of it and show his friends in Pakistan because it was seen as a lesser bird. I would imagine absolutely. if they had red-tailed hawks there, proper red tails, they wouldn't have the same attitude, would they?
Oh, I agree. I mean, they even look down their nose at my Harris hawk generally, and I was like, you need to think of it not as a broad-winged hawk and think of it more like because I frankly think Harris hawks really shouldn't be parabuteo, but might be like para-accipiter or something, because Harris hawks are just they're built far more like a goshawk than they are like a red tail. And I'm seeing grimaces now. But
Casey, what do you think?
I don't know about all that. I think paracorvid.
Hey,
paracorvid is better fitting, I think.
Yeah, well, maybe. I mean, they're smart like crows.
They look like a crow. They fly like a crow. It's perfect. Just joking. I'm just joking.
But I would say Harris hawks are far faster than red tails. They're not quite as fast as a goshawk, but while they're a broader wing than a goshawk, that tail, man, shape-wise, that's not buteo. That's goshawk.
Yeah, they're definitely good. They're definitely good at what they do, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what happened. 30 years ago when I was a kid, right when I was about to get my general permit, I'm 18, and man, Harris hawks were the coolest thing there were. Everybody was like, "Ooh, Harris hawks, wow!" And now everybody's like, "Oh, Harris hawks." Everybody's got a Harris hawk, And I won't let my apprentices buy Harris hawk. I'm still old school that you're either trapping a kestrel or trapping a red tail. And do you want like the hard year of you're going to be weighing a kestrel twice a day, and be meticulous, or are we going to like try and get you excited by having a fairly big, head count with a red tail? You're trapping your first bird if you're my apprentice. At any rate, I've had a lot of online friends sort of trash talking Harris hawks, and I recall, there's one of my favorite little go-to falconry manuals growing up was what was it? Sam Rowley's book. I think it's Discovering Falconry, maybe. And it's a little bitty paperback, yellow covered book that was $12 in the 80s. And the last chapter, he just gives a little, the whole of the book is basically, whether or not you're flying a kestrel or a red tail, beginners, kind of an apprentice manual. The last section, there's a section on diseases, and then there's a section on other birds of falconry. And one of the things he says about Harris hawks is that folks like getting into their retirement that really liked the excitement of flying a goshawk, but now need to kind of chill out, will find great company with a Harris hawk. And I find that to be true, is that, if you were to compare them to cars, your all your Falcons are like a Ferrari. You got to keep them absolutely in tune, otherwise they're garbage. If you're not flying a if you're flying a long wing, you're not flying it every day. It's might as well be sitting on blocks. But red tails and Harris hawks are a Chevy pickup truck. You can have a Harris hawk sit on a perch in your yard 6 days a week and then go fly it on Saturdays. She's not as good as she could be, but she's fine. It's, so you'll have a good time. They're indestructible, and so, it's, they're very reliable, and kind of idiot proof, which probably is one of the bad things, is that they make really lazy falconers. Right.
Yeah. Well, that's the whole thing is, when they first got introduced into falconry, people were going crazy and they were like all the rage to have a Harris hawk. It was just the simplicity of it and how good they are. And then I think nowadays it just kind of like people are understanding that, and this is no disrespect, it just doesn't take the same level of skill to fly one.
Right. Oh yeah. No, absolutely doesn't. No, okay. Any idiot can fly Harris hawk. Yeah. And that's, if you look at like all the, falconry demos at castles in Europe, right? What are they flying? They're flying American Harris hawks, American red-tailed hawks, now American kestrels and owls. Go anywhere in Europe. I was in Britain a few years ago, and guys standing on the side of the road in Edinburgh, like, come take your picture with my predatory bird. It was, you had a Eurasian eagle owl, and everything else was an American bird. A Harris hawk, a red tail, an American kestrel. Right? Go to, I've got friends in Italy that are flying. My dad was Italian. My cousin was the U.S. ambassador to Italy. All over Italy, there are hundreds of little castles people go to visit. They'll have some crappy Renaissance fair, falconry demo out in the yard, and everybody's dressed, like a Rennie Fair kid, and they're all flying red tails, Harris hawks, kestrels, and whatever owl, occasionally an eagle, which is cool, but eagles don't really take anything either. Eagles are just big. We don't even have really good definitions of what an eagle is other than big. right? I mean, because a golden eagle is in no way, shape, or form related to a martial eagle or I mean, like there's so many different kinds of eagles, and really for us as Americans anyway, it's just eagle just means big, but they're not. Other than big, they're not difficult. Um, but yeah, I mean, I think Airsoft's pretty cool. They do really cool stuff. Um, Again, it's nice to have a couple of really dependable birds that you can go and fill the freezer with. And so I mean, while I like Cooper socks and zippers too, Cooper socks die. The president of the Georgia Falconry Association for many years was a guy named Roy DeWitt, and he was just all about accipiters. He had a couple of goshawks. He was really trying to breed goshawks. Turned out he had nails shooting blanks into his hand for 5 years before he finally, realized that there was, had such a low sperm count, he wasn't going to get anything. But he stopped flying Passage Cooper socks because he couldn't keep them alive. They'd just die. And I came upon sort of my lazy method for Passage Cooper socks, which is just take, like feed them up, like on a whole pigeon. If you trap them on a vested pigeon or if you trap them in a Swedish goshawk trap with pigeons, put them in a dark mew, and they're like, don't necessarily feed them the first day if they're pretty fat, but hand them a whole live pigeon on your hand first day, first feed. If they hit it and kill it, great. But if it takes them a day and a half or 2 days to figure that out, but that's what they understand. They understand killing for food. That old nonsense of sit them on your gloved hand and try and feed them tidbits, for the first 2 days. Cooper socks would sooner starve to death than look at you in a bright room sitting on your hand trying to eat little cut up pieces of chicken. That's not what they do. So I'll feed them a whole pigeon. The next day or a day and a half, the next time they'll actually feed, it'll be half a pigeon, and then I'll cut them down that way. But really, I'm just throwing food at them for the first week, and letting them be fat. But it's food that they understand, because everybody I know in Georgia and around that tried to start flying Passage Cooper socks has killed an awful lot of them because they just starve to death. So, there's something to be said for like, well, I could go work my ass off with a Cooper sock, or, I've got a pair of Hera socks and I could go fill my freezer. And my joy really is flying my long wings. So, I mean, I like flying accipiters too. I like flying my Hera socks too. It's not, but, you know, um, uh, there's something to be said for dependable.
I totally agree with that. Harrisocks done well are impressive birds, and like you said, you can't beat the reliability.
Yeah, same with the red tail. I mean, I'll tell you, my favorite bird, best game hawk I ever had was this female deer prairie. She got aspergillosis. We were working on a landfill in California. I flew her to Georgia to have Stephen Divers as a vet at the UGA vet school. He developed a laparoscopic surgery to remove granulomas of aspergillosis. So I spent thousands of dollars flying her here and having that surgery done. 2 years later, she needed it again. This was before voriconazole was around, right? So when she first got asper, I was treating her with amphotericin B and fluoroconazole. And she was getting better, but she wasn't getting well. Anyway, I had surgery done a couple of times. But, with a Harris Hawk, it's like, well, Harris Hawks back in the day were $400. Am I going to spend $3,000 on her? No, except that maybe I love her, right? So, if she's your only bird, you might. But the thing is, you're not going to have to, right? You've got a Gyr hybrid or a Saker. Yeah, you're going to get aspergillosis. I mean, at some point, you're going to fuck up. Her condition's going to drop low. She's going to get an aspirin infection, and you're going to be spending some money at the vet. It's going to happen, right? If you're flying big long wings, you're going to invest in good telemetry. Otherwise, you're going to lose your bird. None of that is true with a Harris Hawk. Like, I've never put telemetry on my Harris Hawks, ever. I put a bell on each one, and I don't really need it. That's mostly just so I don't step on them in the long grass, and right? Like, oh, that's right, she's right over there. But I've never had I've had 3 Harris Hawks. I still have 2. My male is 14 years old, I think. My female's 9. My last Harris Hawk, she had a compound fracture of the humerus because she got sucked up into a ceiling fan because my servant turned on the ceiling fan. She was free lofted in a bedroom in my house in Karachi.
What'd you do to the servant?
I broke his arm.
Was he flogged incessantly?
No, I broke his arm and fired him.
Okay. Are you serious?
Yeah. Yeah.
Good. Maybe I'll move to Pakistan. It sounds nice.
Anyway, so I took her down. I thought for sure the vet down the block, Isma Dodiwala was her name. I thought for sure she was just going to say euthanize her. He's like, no, we can put in a pin. But she's like, the only anesthetic I have is ether. I'm like, we're not doing that. You'll kill her. I mean, she'll hiss and she'll just breathe too deep, and that's it. So I assisted with the surgery, and we put in a pin, no anesthetic, and stitched up the wound. And anyway, she molted out, and after we took the pin out, she molted out again, and a year later she was fine and flying, and she flew for another 2 years. And what killed her is I had a in my muse I had her on one side, a red tail on the other. This red tail was enormous. I mean, just massive, huge red tail. And the floor was just dirt, right? It was just earth, And my Harris Hawk dug a tunnel trying to get at my red tail, and my red tail killed her and ate her. And I walk up and I see this red tail with a crop, size of a grapefruit. And I don't see my Harris Hawk, and I get into the muse and I see, feet and Jess's, and on the Harris Hawk side of the mew, and that red tail just grinning at me. I didn't like that red tail anyway, but that did not make me love her.
So now, like on the whole Harris Hawk conversation, and you said you had a few apprentices. Would you recommend somebody who's, let's say late teens, early 20s, they get their general class falconry license, jumping straight into Harris Hawks, or do you think they should do something a little bit more, challenging?
So it depends on. I think it depends on the falconer and depends on their circumstances, right?
Okay,
so
good.
So with when I have an apprentice, I go one of 2 ways with an apprentice. If you're already kind of a hunter, and you really don't have insane amounts of time, I'll recommend you get a red tail, and you start with a red tail, because I think even a first year apprentice is going to be able to take game, even if it's two or three squirrels. They'll at least take game with a red tail. Whereas if you've got a young kid who really needs to understand structure and discipline, and they've got a lot more time on their hands, I recommend a kestrel, because then it's you're going to be charting this weight and really dial it in. Now, once they're a general, again, it will depend. If they're the avid hunter who wants excitement and wants to have a high head count, I'll say, okay, let's try a Cooper's Hawk. If they're, if they've got the open spaces and good place to say fly ducks or doves or stuff like that, I'll recommend, bigger long wings. If, however, they need something dependable and idiot proof that, because wife and kids and job and whatever, is in the way. I don't mind if they get a Harris Hawk. I think this Harris Hawks are just fine. But again, it depends on the circumstances that falconer's in. I mean, really, ultimately, all of us, you think back in the day, there were falconers that flew falcons and ostrichers that flew other stuff, right? But we're all the same category now, except for the owl people. The owl people are just weird.
Casey's an owl person now.
I'm an owl person now.
Yeah, well, you're weird. Yeah, I see him. But
coolest bird I ever had.
I've never had any luck with owls. I've had a couple owls. I've had a few owls. I've had no luck with owls whatsoever. But at any rate, we're all in the same category. So while lots of people go, this is what I really like. I like flying long wings or I like flying short wings. Ultimately, we're all still the same tribe because there are maybe 10,000 of us on the continent, right? There's 130 guys in Georgia. The city of Atlanta alone, the metro area is 6 million people. I can fit every falconer in Georgia in one bar and not exceed the fire marshal's limit, right? But so if we took every falconer on the continent, we wouldn't fill up a major stadium. There aren't that many of us, so we're all the same people. So since we're all the same people, we kind of vacillate, but amongst, I'm going to fly short wings or long wings or broad wings based on what's going on. I don't know anybody who's only ever flown short wings. I don't know anybody who's only ever flown long wings. If they've been flying for more than, say, 10 years, they've all, okay, I started with a red tail and then I went to this and then I went to this. But we've all had a little bit of experience with everything, and Mike decided I'm more of a long winger than a dirt hawker, but or vice versa. But that's because you went, where you are in New York, you're more of a goshawk guy. But if we put you out in Wyoming, you might go, yeah, I could get down with a deer falcon. Let's do that for a while.
Yeah,
right?
That's a good point.
So
I'd still fly goshawks in Wyoming, though. I try to catch jacks and everything else, and then.
Yeah.
But you're right. I
Right.
eventually would be like, okay, look where I am. I should give it a shot and try fly along.
Yeah.
I could fly long wings where I'm at. I'm 15 minutes from a very popular, famous area of New York where you can easily fly ducks with long wings with success. I have a little bit of a problem right now with my obsession for goshawks, so I have to see that through, and then once I see that through,
like I said, we're all nuts. We're all addicts.
we are. We really are.
I'm moving out to Elberton, and literally, I bought a second 20-foot container. 20-foot container. That's nothing but falconry gear.
Yeah.
That's all it is. It's 20-foot container. Nothing.
So, Alan, we're at the point that I feel like we could go on, and maybe we should do a part 2 episode. But I wanted to ask you in closing, what do you think that we could implement in America that they implement in the Middle East to make us better falconers?
Oh, well, see, I don't know that they are better falconers. I think I really don't.
Well, I don't.
And I don't.
I wasn't. Yeah, and I get what you're saying, and I think that is kind of a cliche, right, or a misconception.
I'll tell you the difference is that they're generational falconers. Falconry is part of the culture in the Middle East and in Pakistan, right? And it's and in the Middle East, it's sort of a status thing, right? Like falconry is to the, like, say, the Arab Emirates what golf is to Scotland, right? So I don't think Scottish golfers are better than American golfers, right? They have golf as more of their culture. I think the falconers in the U.S. sort of reinvented it, and didn't look to the old world. Like, I think probably the single best falconry how-to guide is Philip Glacier's Falconry and Hawking. But then, like, I'm also a big fan of Nick Fox. But like Beebe and Webster, they didn't have those guys to look at, right? They didn't have, you know, 400 years of ancestry. And like, I learned falconry from my dad and my grandfather, right? I mean, falconry has always been sort of that's your addiction, right? Like, you somehow catch the bug, but you don't necessarily pass it on to your kids, and it wasn't passed on to you. I would say falconry for us is this weird addiction that nobody else outside of the falconry world understands. But in Pakistan and in the Arab states, it's not a weird obsession. It's just part of the culture. I don't know that implementing that or any of that would make us better falconers. I think we're better falconers because of our quirky, weird obsession. Because I mean, like, all of us have huge falconry libraries, and like, you might not be somebody who reads for pleasure, but you'll read everything about falconry for pleasure because you're a falconry nut, or I mean, but when I met Stephen Divers, he was giving a lecture about developing this surgery, and everybody else in the room just sort of looked at it like, I don't understand what you're talking about. And I was like, I understand exactly what you're talking about. And when I've taken a couple of birds to him. In point of fact, I may have caused his divorce. He was married to a super hot Colombian chick. He had actually hyphenated his last name with her. And I called him up and I said, look, I'm bringing a bird to you. She's got aspergillosis. You're going to do your surgery. And he's like, look, this isn't a really good time. Things are kind of rocky with my wife. And I said, look, Stephen, I'm going to be on this flight to Atlanta. I will be in Athens on Thursday. If you're not at your office, I'm coming to your house. Right. I was like, everybody knew you were punching above your weight. I don't care. The woman's, banging some other dude. Like, let her, just give her half your house and be done with it. But at any rate, I show up at the vet clinic, and he's got like 6 students with him. And he's like, this is why I love falconers. Watch this. And he says to me, Alan, what does she weigh? I said, well, she's down to 930 grams. He goes, well, what should she be at? I said, she should be at 1,250 grams. And he's like, and he turns to his students and goes, nobody with a cage bird, some parrot, will ever be able to tell you that. Right. And he's like, this is why I love falconers. They know what they're doing. I had a crop bound bird when I just moved to Uniontown, Pennsylvania, and one of my birds got crop bound, and everything was all packed up because I'd literally just moved in. It was probably the move that got her crop bound. And I went to this nearby vet, and I said, look, I need a syringe and some tubing right now. She goes, well, I'm a small animal vet. I don't do birds. I said, I'm not asking you to do anything other than hand me a damn syringe and some tubing so I can siphon out this crop. And she's like, and I said, look, I'm a falconer. I know more about birds of prey than you do. You can give my dog and my cat their shots. The CVS doesn't have what I need, and you're the next best thing. So, I mean, I don't think there's anything necessarily that we would take from India or Pakistan or the Middle East that would make us better falconers, with maybe the general acceptance of falconry on a cultural level. But again, I think that might make us worse falconers as a country, right? It's sort of like, I don't know, I've got my Springer Spaniel sitting next to me. Unless he's in the car, he's not on a leash. He's only on a leash on the car. And that's just in case I crash on the highway and need to be able to have him on a leash. right? On my farm, when I'm walking, he's not on a leash. When I'm walking around Atlanta, if I see somebody with one of those retractable leashes, I turn around and walk the other way because I know that person doesn't train their dog, right? Similarly, when I see another falconer, I'm going to judge them a little bit. How are they holding this bird? Do they know what they're doing? Whatever. But if we just had falconry as a cultural norm, I think there'd be a whole lot of crap falconers out there. I think we don't have to be selective in taking on apprentices because anybody that's going to do it caught the bug. I think the number of people that catch the bug are so small that we can pretty well keep falconry pretty good in this country.
That's good. I like that.
Yeah. But yeah, let's do this again, and hopefully by that time, my technical issues will be better sorted out, and I won't have to wait an hour to do it.
No, it was.
You've got some straight up fascinating takes and some really interesting information.
Yeah, I was like diving in. Like when you were talking, I was just like, my eyes were rolling back in my head, and I was like on the beach with you as you're describing chasing these quail, dart hawking, and I'm just, that's amazing.
Oh, it was a blast, dude. I mean, like every morning, literally, I'd be in, gym shorts and a tank top and flip flops. Walk down, get a cup of tea, and have a cigarette, and go throw shikras at quail, and then walk home and do it again.
Sounds like heaven.
And it pretty well was. I mean, I that year that I spent in Pakistan was one of my best. I mean, it was like, I was flying 2 shikras, 2 rumties, 2 red-headed merlins, my Kalidas tiercel, the 2 goshawks at a time. I had 3, but two that were flying at a time, and my Harris hawk until her wing broke. I would go out hunting with Salman. He was mostly flying. He flew red-headed merlins, but he also flew red-named Shaheen. And then the guys from the Emirates, Mohammed and Abdul Aziz, they were flying Sakers pretty much exclusively on Hubara, but also Chucker Partridge and Black Franklin. Occasionally we go out coursing hounds with the guys that go run and chase down black buck and desert hare with greyhounds.
Incredible.
That was fun, But I mean, yeah, I was working for the census in 2010, and I had a buddy who was a big game hunter, and he and I were talking about, he had all these trophy hunter friends that would spend thousands upon thousands of dollars to go on safari to places nobody else could afford to go on safari and come back with a great piece of taxidermy. I said we should start doing that in Pakistan, and he's like, really? I said, well, I mean, there's a lot of big game in Pakistan, and there's a lot of stuff that nobody else at their gun club is going to have ever done, just because by virtue of it being in the Islamic Republic of Pakistan. I mean, a rich white dentist will go to Kenya to shoot an elephant, but if you're wanting to shoot a markhor, will he go to Islamic Republic of Pakistan? Probably not.
Yeah, it's another level of commitment to hunt that.
Well, even if it's like not just the difference of hunting a markhor. Like, I mean, I think the level of commitment to hunt markhor is the same as hunting a bighorn sheep in Alaska. It's can you get over this sort of racist fear of being in a white American going to the Islamic Republic of Pakistan?
Right.
And but I mean, really, you could do everything in Pakistan. You could do it in India too. You could go to the Arab states. The Arab states is just going to cost you a whole lot more money, and but
right.
I mean, the consul general from Tajikistan, he had a couple of tigers, but I met him. Weirdest day of my life. He rolled up to this restaurant with a tiger in the backseat of his Toyota Celica. It's bizarre. I had a guy show up at my house that morning with a bear, and the guy was playing bagpipes, and I play the bagpipes. So it was a weird day. But I went back to his house, and he had a couple of stakers, and and he's like, you need to come up to Tajikistan and fly birds up here. And I wish I'd gone. Life happened, and I never got up to Tajikistan. But um, there's a lot of cool falconry in a lot of the world. And the cool thing about Pakistan is you can see most of it at the same time.
Wow. Okay.
Right.
So me and Aaron will plan a trip there for the podcast.
Do it. Yeah.
You'll be our guide.
Let me know. Yeah. I'll theoretically, I still own a house.
Yeah. That's what I'm saying.
It's probably been stolen, but but no,
that's incredible.
Yeah. No, it's awesome.
It's just an amazing opportunity that you had, and taking the plunge and doing that and moving over there for a year and committing to it.
Yeah.
And these are some incredible stuff, the memories you'll have for the rest of your life, and you're sharing them with us and our listeners, and we appreciate it, man. We appreciate your time coming on.
Yeah, my pleasure.